Here we go. Pat Ziemer here with Office Hours, Magna Wave Office Hours, Tuesday afternoon, PM edition. We're glad to be here. My special guest today is Dr. John Kressler. He's going to give us some background on him and PEMF and what brought him to PEMF. But just as you well know, we're here each Tuesday in what we call office hours to answer your questions, whatever those questions may be, about magna waving, PEMF therapy, our devices, whatever it may be. We want to answer your questions as straightforward and as transparent fashion as we possibly can. So if you have questions and you're with us today, please feel free to put them up. I did receive some questions this morning after our live broadcast on the early edition of Magna Wave Office Hours, and we'll be going through some of those questions as we go, and so we'll look into that as we move along. But as I said, my guest is Dr. John Kressler. Dr. Kressler is from the Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area, and he's a doctor, and he's going to tell us a little bit about that. So, Dr. John, thank you for being with us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself for those of you who may not know about you.
Surely. Well, thanks again, Pat, for having me here.
Glad you're here.
Glad to have our round two, and hopefully answers things a little differently and try to expand a little more than the previous session, if you're comparing. In saying that, I, at first, initially was involved in international politics and diplomacy and worked as a foreign policy analyst for a securities bank, and decided to leave that realm and go into medicine. So I had to change gears and get a degree from University of Maryland in physiology and neuroscience, which led me eventually to 6 years of medical school, internship, and then postdoctoral graduate research fellowship in breast cancer.
Where'd you go to school?
So I qualified in medicine in Ireland, Dublin, Ireland, at the University College of Medicine, and then did my internship in medicine at Cork University Hospital in Cork, Ireland.
So you're basically licensed in Europe and Ireland at this point, okay?
Correct. And then after my internship, I had gotten into applied and gotten into a PhD program in pharmacology and toxicology at the University of Maryland School of Medicine in Baltimore, Maryland. And from there, I had some issues with my own health, and I had lost my father to leukemia, which had led me on my path to following alternative or integrative, holistic, I like to use German biological medicine, but orthomolecular, they're all synonymous, non-conventional medicine for the most part. And I try to do so today as a health and wellness advisor for things that I believe in, especially PMF. It's always number one on my list for all my clients when they're looking for help to improve their health.
Okay, so that's always a question when people get involved with PEMF. So what brought you, what caused you to find PEMF and become so devoted into the practice?
So during my postgraduate research fellowship days at Maryland, my father was really suffering from CLL, from leukemia. And my part at that time in my life was to try to design novel or new drugs for breast cancer or prostate cancer patients who had become resistant to the classic chemotherapeutic agents used. And, you know, we used to do these DNA microarray analyses where you pull up thousands of different pathways that a cancer could choose. And I said to myself, this is an impossible task. We can never out-defeat cancer. Although it's quite lucrative to design drugs for every one of those pathways, but realistically, as soon as you close one, another one opens. So I started to think to myself, there's got to be a better way. And then my father had really succumbed to a lot of the side effects or direct effects, however you want to look at it, of chemotherapy at Johns Hopkins. And I saw the devastation of his own health, and eventually he didn't die of cancer. He died of the side effects of the drugs that were given. And this really was, between those two, was the first big step for me to realize there's got to be another way. And shortly after his passing, I had problems with chronic fatigue immune deficiency syndrome. And that really focuses on many, many different things, but as a general rule, patients like myself would suffer from a lot of typical viral infections that most everyone has, but they're asymptomatic. High titer levels, mitochondrial dysfunction, just low ability to produce energy. And so I had sought help in the classical internal medicine field, and they ran very conventional laboratory testing on me, to which nothing was really unusual. And then from that point, you wind up going to, as with all patients, to psychiatry. And I said, this is not...
So you're okay, you just need to get something fixed up here.
Right, exactly.
People have been telling me that a long time.
Exactly. I said, well, I would love to say, and I'm sure there's, things I could benefit from, my psychiatric colleagues. But I said, that's not the problem. And that's when I had drawn the line in the sand for me, that I said, I have to find another way. And so there I was as a physician scientist, heading on a new path. I didn't know where it was going to take me. I started with Cenogenics Medical Institute as a practice development physician, where we concentrate on nutrition, exercise, and hormonal balancing, and some supplements.
So you were having chronic fatigue syndrome type. What was that doing to you? What was a day like? What was a typical day?
Great question. So with chronic fatigue immune deficiency syndrome, you see a pan or across the board decline in hormonal levels, cognitive levels, metabolic issues. So for me, who was used to doing 110, 120-hour work week, being on call every other day, you went from being able to work, like I said, 100-plus hour work week, down to difficulty with the productivity of anything of worth to maybe 5 or 6 hours.
A week?
A day.
A day.
A day. As opposed to a 15 or 17-hour nonstop full cylinder.
So you're working 25 hours a week and being done.
Right.
Exhausted.
Right, exactly. And I said, well, I'm clearly going to have to do something about this.
Right.
So, again, I started looking at the basics, nutrition and exercise, and basic hormonal balancing, and supplementation where needed. And it was good. We were very successful with about 50% of our patients, and another 50% we didn't help.
What about you?
So for me, it made a big difference.
Okay.
For me, it made a big difference. Once I learned how to properly, and I'd always been involved in bodybuilding and weight training, strongman competitions. So I always had some edge on the nutrition and exercise side, but I realized even I needed to be re-educated. I was using very much old model, and it helped me a lot in the beginning.
So, okay, you're down to 25-hour work week.
Right.
You change your diet, you change your exercise structure, you change your supplementation, and what did that take you to?
Then it took you to maybe, say, a 30 or 35-hour week,
okay.
if you're lucky.
Okay, so then what?
So the real big aha for me was I was at a medical conference.
That's what I'm looking for, is the aha.
Okay. I was at a conference in Hollywood, Florida, at the AMMG. And a friend of ours, Mark Squibb, Live O2, Live O2 now, came to me and said, "You ever heard of PEMF?" And I said, "No, I haven't." He says, "You have a moment?" I said, "Of course." It was our hour break, and I was curious to see what all this ticking around sound was. And when he explained it to me, I said, this is too good to be true.
Right.
But I still remember the first experience. It was profound. I had gone back. I'd done about a 10 or 15-minute treatment. I didn't have that much time. And I said, all right, well, thanks. Nice to meet you. And I was back in lecture, and I realized something had happened. I had never experienced it before.
First day.
The first day. And I realized I need to go back to that. So as soon as I got out of lecture, I said, what just happened to me? And I realized that from that point onward, that looking at things through pharmacology or chemistry really wasn't the way to look at medicine, but to look at it through biophysics and to look at the body as an electrical being. And it's something we're just not taught in our training or in our curricula. But that really turned me around, and ever since then, I have been working with all kinds of PMF, from ringers to oscillators, and a big believer in energy medicine. It turned my life around.
Okay, so it
made me functional.
Made you functional.
Made me functional.
How long? So we're after your two regimens, you're 25 hours a week, 35 hours a week. So you started using this. Obviously, you had to get a hold of some things or find yourself in a location where you could get treatments.
Right.
What was your progression?
Well, Bill Pollack helped me out a lot. He's from Maryland. He's one of the, I would consider the pioneers or visionaries in energy medicine. Did a lot of his work. He's also a licensed acupuncture. So Bill worked with me a lot after Mark, and explained to me many things. And he was the one that turned me on to say that I want to make this part of my career somehow. Because what it had done for me, I wish I would have had the chance to do that from my father at the time, but I didn't. But my training really started from that time 5 years ago, and it just led me on another path. Of
so you started doing the PEMF on a regular basis. How often?
Well, I generally, when I first started off, when I was first able to afford my machine, I was using it about 2 hours a day in the beginning. I pretty much today, almost every day, if possible, get at least an hour in, a half hour in the morning or an hour at the end of the night when I do my reading.
And where are you today? I know we've got 5 years, but how long before you felt like, okay, I've got my work control, I've dealing with this chronic fatigue? How long did that take?
Well, I mean, the results are almost instantaneous. It's a little bit different when you're using PMF therapy as opposed for a chronic disease of unknown etiology, as opposed to something that is acute like pain or chronic pain. My belief is unless you solve the underlying problems that are causing the cellular disharmony, you are going to continue to need to have PMF at those longer times, as opposed to someone who has a back condition or a neck or a shoulder condition, knee, where you can treat them pretty aggressively for a week, and they can go maybe several weeks, and you can touch them up along the way. But people with cancer, neurodegenerative diseases, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, these diseases, this has to become a part of your lifestyle. You have to go beyond the practitioner. You have to have it at home, and you have to use this every day.
So you've done that. You've gotten yourself to the point that you have your device. You do it all the time. You're now trying to do it an hour a day, half hour in the morning, half hour in the evening, whatever the regimen may be. So where are you now on your energy level, your fatigue, your work levels?
Well, and thank you for asking, Pat. I'd love to explain it. I mean, I would tell you this, that if I had not corrected the basics, balancing the hormones and putting the nutrition and the exercise, the PMF would have made a huge difference. But when you have your basics lined up and the PMF enhances all that, that's a game changer.
Okay.
You know what I mean? But I'd rather you eat McDonald's, so to speak, and do PMF than have an organic diet and not have PMF. If you ask me between the two, and I know it sounds like an absurd comparison, but it really is not. You'll get more from the McDonald's on PMF than you ever will from going to Whole Foods.
So what is your stamina level, work level today?
So where would I be today? So if I started, say, 2007, if I was a 2 or a 3 on a scale of energy level, today I'd be about a 7 or 8.
So you're up to, let's put that in equation. You went from 25 hours a week to 35 hours a week. Are you at the 40, 50 hours a week?
40, 50 hours. Yeah.
Okay. So,
and there's still room for improvement. But it becomes smaller gains at this point.
Do you feel I had a friend that had chronic a fatigue syndrome, and she would talk about it, and all of a sudden we'd go through the day, and she was just done. Do you if you work normal, you take care of yourself, you have your proper supplementation, you do your PEMF, everything's in balance, as you say. Do you feel you go through a week and everything's fine? You don't feel like you have the issue?
No, I feel good. But the PMF at the end of the day for me, it was the life changer. I couldn't imagine sustaining life over the last 5 years without PMF. That's how instrumental it was for me.
So you're in a position that you were working 60 and 80 and 100 hours a week. Right. You're not doing that now because of your counseling, the way you're handling your business, but you're able to, from your perspective, with all of this, you're able to work a normal 40 to 50 hour work week, no problem, and you consider yourself in a pretty normal state.
I do. And again, the other additional therapies that I use are all synergistic with the PMF. But what the PMF is the cornerstone. You cannot build from there. And so when we see patients like in Germany and integrative oncology, we're using IV infusions, all these things, the bottom line is everything works better when the cells are healthier.
When the battery's charged.
When the battery's charged.
And that's basically what we're doing with this, is we're charging up the body's battery. Right. And if you've got full charge on your battery, everything else seems to work pretty well. If the light bulb's not any worth a darn, then it doesn't make any difference if your battery's charged or not.
And I know we had discussed it earlier in the first one, but, we talked about magnetic deficiency syndrome. It's a real problem. The Earth, we were thriving 150, million years ago. The Earth's combined magnetic field from above and below was around 30 Gauss. Today, we're at 0.03 at best, somewhere around the equator, and it goes less to the North and South Pole, respectively. And so we just don't get the charge from the Earth. Plus we wear rubber shoes. We're surrounded by EMF. We're not getting the healing from the Earth that we're meant to have.
We're not wirelessly charging anymore.
Exactly. Exactly that. So the reality is we now need to get it artificially.
Right.
And so I say this to everyone, to all the viewers. I said the best investment you could ever make is to have for your family and friends or a community center to have a PMF unit where everyone can come in. And like in Sweden, we have these things where if you want to use the laundry machine, you have time slots. You have a 15-minute or a half-hour time slot. You put a key in there and time it. And you can have these in the community centers, as long as the legalities are there, and everyone can appreciate and enjoy the benefits of PMF. But it is something you need to do for life.
Okay. Excellent. And it was interesting to hear your story and how you put it together and how it's allowed you to come back to what would be a normal work procedure and energy levels that most people have to operate in on their daily life. So, folks, if you're out there and you have a question, what is it you were going to say?
Well, I was going to say, I also, in conjunction to chronic fatigue, I also have problems with Lyme disease.
Oh, okay.
And now Lyme disease has become a pandemic. And the biggest problem with Lyme disease is that these intracellular pathogens are not able to be seen by the immune system. And that the forces, if you will, if you want to use a military sort of terminology for your immune system, in most people, whether it's cancer or chronic fatigue or Lyme disease, the army is out just all over the shop, and that they don't have the energy or the resources to spend on treating the Lyme. And the PMF technology boosts the immune system, the specific immune system, by over 60%. There's nothing like that. There's no prescription. There's no supplement, natural or synthetic, that can give you your immune system that kind of increase in efficacy. It does not exist. And I say that to anyone who has an autoimmune or immune system deficiency to seriously consider adding PMF into your life.
So when you talk about the immune system, and specifically Lyme, you may have a particular, and I think you do, particular protocols that you use with Lyme disease. But I always share the story that it's been amazing to me over the years. Today, thank God, we've got an array of devices and various price ranges that allow more people to become involved to use this type of therapy. But back just a few years ago, we had one device, one particular price, and that's the way things were.
Yes.
But I was always amazed that someone would call, I've got Lyme disease, I want to do this, or I did this, had this one treatment, and I feel so much better.
Yes.
And they would go and they would treat the area of their body where they experienced the Lyme disease, and that would help that area pretty quickly.
Yes.
And then they would go on to facilitate full body treatments basically on an ongoing basis, and they'd buy a machine.
Absolutely.
Just for their personal use to have at home sitting next to their couch.
And that's so happy to see that.
Yeah. But you know, and today we have different machines to do different things and can be used in different ways, whether it's for a professional standpoint or being able to cover a wide gamut of uses. So, you know, what is your basic, how do you approach a protocol for, and I know you got your eyes lit up when we were visiting yesterday about there are Lyme issues with horses and with small animals. And and with people, what is your protocol? What is your basis for treating a person with Lyme?
Well, you know, a mentor and colleague of mine, Dr. Klotsanis in Dallas, Texas, you know, always said, you know, as a clinician, you need to remember that good health is 1/3 spiritual, 1/3 emotional, 1/3 organic. We in medicine spend so much time on concentrating on just the organic problems that we forget the 2/3. The emotional and the spiritual. So in a human case, I would work very much with things like recall healing or Stephen Vasquez, EFT tapping, things of this to help out the emotional, because every chronic disease is associated with an unresolved emotional conflict. So we as family practitioners or internists or medical people forget about the spiritual and the emotional.
So you're saying, I'm not saying that you're saying, but you're telling us and that we have a physical issue with our body, and it's brought about with some stress from an emotional issue, whether that's a family issue or a psychological issue, that's something frightened or whatever, the PTSD that exists or doesn't, but it's an emotional issue that comes, and I think people quite often forget that they find themselves in a situation that they become a magnet for a disease to attack them because they're not emotionally prepared to fight that. Okay.
And that's huge. I mean, what I'm saying is, so we have lots of protocols that involve PMF to treat the 1/3 organic, but in my protocols, you definitely spend a fair amount of time working on the emotional and spiritual, because without that, you can never have fully, truly good health.
And you know, that's something...
And that's generational.
Exactly.
And pass this on.
And when you talk about PEMF, over the years when we did it, people would say, gee, I felt so good after this treatment, or I was so much more relaxed, or I slept better last night than I've slept in ages. And so then we started thinking, oh, well, if it improves the sense of well-being or improves relaxation and improves sleep, it's got to be improving your stress level or reducing your stress level that allows you to better attack what needs to be attacked internally.
Right. I mean, for example, I think of a correlation, you know, if you are in a positive mantra, so to speak, as opposed to a negative, this difference in positive thinking, for a lack of vocabulary at the moment, actually exposes the DNA to elongate. And therefore, it allows the DNA to express and go through transcription and translation and produce more genes to help us. But on the opposite, if you have an emotional, unresolved conflict, then these negative thoughts cause the DNA to contract. And so PMF can't even get to them. So if you don't resolve some of these things just through counseling and through other techniques, you can't even benefit all the way completely from even PMF. But it does work both ways, but it works better when you address the other 2/3. That's what I'm trying
to you want to address the physical issue.
Now, the horse is another story.
Well, but still, I mean, we have situations. It's amazing when your horse feels better and you work the pole that we talk about on the horse, or the atlas, and the neck and the shoulders, and they're under less stress and they feel better. They're healthier.
Right, or unless you have a good animal communicator.
They will participate
Right.
better,
Right.
and so that whole thing comes into play.
Absolutely.
They just, there's no placebo effect when you're dealing with animals.
No, that's right.
It works or it doesn't,
That's exactly right.
and so you get into that type of situation. This is incredible to have this conversation, and folks, I hope that you're finding it from a learning perspective to be beneficial. We appreciate those of you who are with us. If you have any questions, just throw them up on the Facebook page, and we'd be happy to answer them and to approach the questions that you may have. We had a couple of questions that came in this morning. Actually, I've got several that we can approach and go through this. But one of the questions, and you kind of touched on it this morning, Shannon was asking the question, and I don't have the specific wording that she was talking about, but it talks about the effects of PEMF on hormonal deficiencies with regard to pregnancy or regard to any issues that someone may have. Okay. And tell me about that.
Well,
and how you approach it, because I know hormones are an important part of what you do.
I mean, the hormones are the keys to good health. And unfortunately, and in the world that we live in, 10 years ago, I would say at the age of 40, you ought to be evaluated. But with the increasing toxicity that we are experiencing and magnetic deficiency syndrome, our endocrine organs and exocrine organs just do not work properly. I mean, we're born with the umbilical cord of over 300 toxins at birth, and it only gets worse from that point onward. We're just burdened. The system is just run down, and even the hormones cannot be produced. So as we age, these things, some simple things like melatonin, your adrenal glands, not just the sex hormones, everything decreases. The brain, natural peptides, and the AMP in the heart, all these things decrease with age because the cells are becoming unhealthy. And what I try to explain to my clients and colleagues is, I said the best way I would explain PEMF is, without getting into the biophysics, is it takes an unhealthy cell and it makes it healthy. And if an unhealthy cell is an endocrine cell and is supposed to make hormones, it can't do its job. So the PEMF reverts that endocrine cell to make better cells. So with my clients, before I would even look at a hormonal panel, I'd say, let's do 3 months of PEMF, and then we'll reevaluate. And then we can address it.
Because you're approaching it from the PEMF, we always talk about how it gets into the blood cells, helps the oxygenation, do all this kind of stuff. Right. But what you're telling us and explaining to us is that it penetrates everything.
Correct.
So it even penetrates the endocrine cells, and where it needs, where they need development, where they're being dormant, it helps regenerate those cells as well to improve that situation. And Shannon re-asked her question. Thank you, Shannon. And she's dealing with hormone levels, but specifically for someone who may have fertility issues.
Well, that's a possibility. I mean, of course, fertility is, it's 1/3 male, 1/3 female, 1/3 we don't know. And you roll out the male, and then you go to the female, and then you look at her systems. But I would, for my protocols of my clients, I have everyone preventively or prophylactically treat many parts of the body, including the brain. And if you don't work on the hypothalamus pituitary gonadal axes, you're deficient in getting the most benefit from PEMF. So using the butterfly loop, spending 10 or 15 minutes and rotating it around, working on the pineal gland, and working on the pituitary and the hypothalamus is very important in trying to de-inflame the brain. Of course, the large loop, the standard loop, is working on the thymus, waking up those B cells, bringing them back into the system. And of course, all your long bones, where your cells are maturing and coming out are all important to your immune system. But I always have them, sit on the back and work on their adrenals. And, of course, always on the stomach at some point, where 80% of your immune system and neurotransmitters are made, and with leaky gut, there's a protocol to using PEMF within a 20 to 30 minute, range, where you go through these, and I know you have them yourself, Pat, I've seen them, but very important. So to answer her question, I would highly consider, a PEMF device to work specifically on that. But not just that, but to clean the biological milieu or the terrain, the environment, however you want to say it, and then things come around. So the difference, again, as we talked about this
Well,
morning.
yeah, and Shannon has a device,
Right. Oh,
and
good.
so she's looking to, okay, how am I going to incorporate
Yes.
this into these specific areas? And you're talking, here we go, whole body.
Yes.
And and I used to talk about it when people would say, "Were you doing acupuncture points?" I said, "Yeah, I'm doing acupuncture for dummies.
Right.
As long as I get near the acupuncture point, I'm going to stimulate it.
That's right.
And I may not know where it is. But
So
I'm looking to treat this whole body to stimulate all this, and that's kind of what you're saying here.
Yeah. Like we're talking about the migraine in the feet.
Right.
Reflexology,
Exactly.
working those meridians. I mean, this stuff's been around for 6,000 years.
Right.
It works.
Right. So
we don't know why, but it works.
So there are specific areas, as you talked about, the butterfly around the head, and then the low back, and your gut, stomach area
and the genital urinary areas.
Right. Okay. So I hope that was informative for you, Shannon. And this is the kind of thing, as you share this with your friends and clients and so forth. As with most situations, it's probably not immediate, but it's consistency is the key, probably.
Well, I had to, there's one amazing story. Of course, you and I have hundreds of these, but I remember there was a lady, very healthy, postmenopausal lady, 4 or 5 years past menopause, maybe 55, 56. And she was doing a full day of PMF.
Whoa.
And the next day she started menstruating. So, I mean, pretty amazing that you could literally return on the ovarian function by bringing out the dead. So, I mean, obviously, that just goes to show you how amazing that the body wants to go back to homeostasis.
So let's talk about this for a minute. We've both been doing this now for about the same length of time.
Well, you're 3 times as me.
But involved with into the high-powered spectrum of PEMF. And we're talking about being on the head and being over for the thyroid and that kind of stuff. When you get into the back, we're certainly going to use a different intensity on the back than we're going to use on the head, or we're going to use on the thyroid, although you could probably be higher here than you're going to be here. And you may be able to be higher here than you would on your low back, depending on how your low back is. If people have back issues, they're not going to be able to have the intensity on the back. And the way that I've talked about this in the past, people will say, well, should I go low and slow, or how should I go? And what I always say, or always talk about, and I really appreciate your input on this, is let's put as much energy into the area that is comfortable.
I concur with that.
And it's, people will talk Gauss, and they'll talk Tesla, and they'll talk all this, and what we're kind of moving into is an area of energy exchange. Let's put energy into the body. Let's put as much energy in the body that, and I'm not saying you punch it to where you're sitting there saying, okay, that's fun, but you're putting it in, and yes, it's there, and I'm comfortable.
Yes.
And what I do with a man, I'll take them to where they say they're comfortable, and I turn it down because I know the guy's sitting there thinking, yeah, that's great. You knock me out of the chair. One of those kind of things. And so I've just learned. I take it there, then I back it down. Are you comfortable? Yes, I'm comfortable. Great. I'm going to turn it down.
That's absolutely right.
But it's all about the energy exchange.
Absolutely. I think we get caught with these numbers that are completely irrelevant. I mean, at the end of the day, energy exchange is why we're here. In fact, I have to give it to one of my mentors in Germany, Dr. Henning Salpa, who used some still high-powered devices, but lower than the ones that we had used to, like our Macs. And when we did dark field microscopy, I was blown away by the results on the lower high voltage devices, not oscillators like the Beamer and all these things. I'm talking about a ringer device. A true PMF high voltage device, that you don't need that much power. In fact, you don't even need to really feel it for it to be working.
Right. It's the signal that's doing
this. It's the energy exchange, the signal. So yes, okay, there are some, you walk off the mat, maybe you feel a little different, but the actual physiological benefit is the same on a lower model, say for like a semi, or for all the way up to a max. It's the same thing on the microscope. There's a little more feel good, but at the end of the day, you need that that device?
Well, and that's a good question.
Right.
In fact, I was asked, it's one of the questions
Right.
that I was also presented with this morning is what is the difference when
Right.
you talk about the power? And when you get into, when someone is using a semi, for example, if we're dealing with someone that's a weightlifter
Right.
or an athlete, whether it's a horse or a dog,
Right.
but if it's an athlete and they spin their knee and all of a sudden it's really hurting, you can put the semi on it and it's going to work.
Absolutely.
But it's not going to work as fast as the max is going
That's
to work.
correct.
And so when you're dealing with depends on the level that you're trying to
Correct.
deal with,
Right.
where you use all those options. So you just got a lot of things in your toolbox, or you got a couple of tools.
Exactly.
They will all do the same
That's
thing.
exactly right.
And it's just a matter of how you have to finesse that screwdriver to open a Phillips head.
And I think it's great that we're bringing this up, because when we started, there was only one device.
Right.
Where now you can get the same benefit for a fraction of the cost. I mean, I wish that existed when we were first exposed to it. There was just one device. That was it.
Right.
But
I have to approach, there's people that have the larger devices,
Yes.
but they have more tools. They can really get
Yes.
after an abscess if it's an animal.
That's right.
Or when we put machines with the Tennessee Titans and they're dealing with these
That's right.
250, 200-pound guys,
Yes.
they want something that does it right now. And that's where the toolbox comes into play.
It's all about the time.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Great. And folks, if you have any questions, Shannon says that the answer was helpful to her.
Good.
We really appreciate you being here with us. And if you have any additional questions, please feel free to ask them. I did get a question this morning from Ronald where he talked about, can you tell us about using the paddle specifically with the semi machine and how that would be beneficial. And I'll explain this and Doc chime in as you wish. The deal with the attachments, and if we talk about energy administered to the body or made available to the body, the energy level or the Gauss delivery, however you want to say it, changes from attachment to attachment. And so then it becomes the amount of tissue that you're stimulating. So don't go there yet, but let's just talk about the attachment. If you have the large loop and it comes out like a fountain into the loop, that we're supplying energy to that whole area. If we bring that down to a smaller loop, we're taking that same amount of energy going through that coil and putting a lot more water into the fountain or in coming out of the spigot at that point in time. Then when you go to the paddle, and the paddle is the comparison I often draw is like a spotlight. You've seen these big spotlights, they have them on boats, or the police, our protectors, have them so they can see, but they're just really bright. I mean, if it gets in your eyes, you can't hardly see what's going on. Well, that's the way the paddle works. It puts out the signal, I call it pancaking. It puts out a solid signal that just comes straight out, and the signal is more intense, so you're going to put more energy in. The unique thing about the paddle with the semi is it doesn't feel as intense. So you can put that paddle on a shoulder or on a back of a horse or on your dog's hip and put a massive amount of energy in there that they will not feel it the way they would with a different kind of coil. And so when you talk about using that paddle with the semi on a person or an animal, you can move it and you are getting more energy applied. And so the energy pulsing is greater with the paddle. Outside of that, the attachments are all the same. For years, we only had two attachments. We had the large loop and the butterfly. And people would say, well, I need this or I need that. And the engineer would look at me and say, no, you need the butterfly or the large loop, and you'll get the results that you're looking for. Well, over time, we have learned that the large wings are very beneficial. If you want to put a wing on the front and back of a person or over the hips of a horse, you can just cover much larger areas of tissue and get that energy into a large area to maybe stimulate an area that you're not knowing needed to be stimulated. That's the thing. This will find areas of sensitivity and areas that need to be stimulated. And so then you can hone in on that area, or you can do the whole great big area. As I always talk about, clearing out the highway after an accident. We want to get the rubberneckers out of the road. Which brings me to a thing that I was reading, and it's really interesting, and I applied it immediately to PEMF. We're talking about autonomous cars and what they're going to do to the congestion on the highways. Studies have shown that if 5% of the cars on the highway are autonomous, being they're driving according to what they're seeing and feeling with the speed limit and everything, it will virtually eliminate rubbernecking. It will eliminate traffic jams. If just 5%, because they will become the pace cars. Well, that's kind of like PEMF. If you continually energize your body and you make the cells healthier, they're going to regulate what the body does and allow the body to better take care of itself and do things. But I was just amazed that just 5% of cars could make that difference. And so there's my thing for my new Tesla that I want to order. No. But at any rate, I just thought that was just amazing, that type of comparison and how things do play together. So, folks, if you have any other questions, we'd be more than happy to answer them for you. We really appreciate you being with us today and hope that this has been a beneficial experience for you. So we'll kind of visit here for a couple of minutes. Let me see if there were some other questions. Great question that was asked this morning. The question was, when I use the device on myself, it can be painful in some areas, like the hip joint area. Is it possible to overdo or cause damage? And I'll give a reply here, and then, John, Doctor, I'll ask you to help me out. If you are putting this type of device on your hip, let's say, and it's uncomfortable, it's too high. Turn it down. And to be comfortable. You don't have to rock your joint in order to make it be effective to what you're doing. So if you're feeling a nipping at yourself and it's uncomfortable, turn it down. Can you cause damage? Well, and people have asked me this, so this has done this, or this can do that, and I'll say the only reason, if you put this on a horse, or a dog, or a cat, or a person, and it's too strong, they will not let you do it. They will walk away, get up, run, hit you, bite you, whatever the situation may be. Now, if you take this and strap this on somebody's hip, and you could turn this machine on for 3 hours and walk away with them strapped to a chair, yeah, you could hurt them. They wouldn't be very comfortable when they come back. But as a rule, can you put it on there? You're not going to do it. If it's more energy than you're comfortable with coming in, number one, it's too high, or if it's too much energy, they won't let you do it. And so, so I hope that helps that particular question was asked. Any thoughts from?
I mean, really, when it comes to pain, there is no pain from PMF except for maybe exhausted, muscular contractions, you know what I mean, which is unnecessary, really. You don't need to have, it depends on the situation. If it's acute or focused or targeted, okay, and you need it quick here and now, yesterday, fine. You can go after these high, energy exchange sessions. But to get benefit and to clean up the road or to do the 5%, you just don't need that. It really is something that took me a long time because we didn't have these options. Now we do, and it really is impressive scientifically to see that for $7,000, you could treat your whole family and huge horses.
Right.
Yes, okay, it's maybe a little longer, but it depends on your time and the immediacy.
Sure.
And I think that when you're going that high on the hip, I would say, what are you trying to achieve? You don't need to use those kind of energy exchange. And it's like an iPhone. Once you're 100%, you can't charge anymore. The
same person asked another question a little later in his question list, and it was saying, I've been a health nut for some time, about 7 years, losing over 60 pounds. For someone who is in good health, does PEMF have as much benefit? Yes. However, if someone's in good health, if my back is not bothering me, I don't use it on my back.
Right.
I'm 68 years old. I'm at the stage of my life where prostate issues are something I need to be concerned about. I have to go for a urology exam once a year now instead of just my physical because I've had some inflammation there. I have a whole story about that, which many of these folks have heard. But I treat myself for my prostate every day. I mean, that's just something I need to do. And I just had my physical yesterday, and for the first time in years, everything was improved. Mm-hmm. I can talk about the C60 with regard to that, but everything was improved. And so even someone that's healthy can prolong their health or be healthier in a more happy fashion.
Right, and I would, to add to that, I would say to our equestrian friends, I mean, we all know that every horse that's won any of the triple stake, Belmont, and, Preakness, the Kentucky Derby,
all the big championships.
All the big championships, all of the horses have been charged. Now, the Titans, some of them, I'm sure, are being charged. So to answer the gentleman's question, if you're in good health, is PMF something good for you? Is it going to show you even more? Well, optimal health, good health, and optimal health are very different. So to answer say the same thing, the answer is yes. And just look at the race horses if that's not enough of an example for me.
Right. Yeah,
we keep healthy to super.
From healthy
Right.
to super healthy.
Right.
People used to come to me all the time. I remember some guys a couple of years ago, 7 guys came over from Dubai, and I spent the day and evening with them, and they wanted to make their camels run their camels. The big camel racing is a big deal. They want how can you make our camels run faster?
Yes.
And I kept saying, you guys don't understand. I can't really make your camels run faster. I can make them run fast longer.
Yeah.
And when you put that's that healthy body. I can take that healthy body and help it be healthier longer. Work good, last a long time. Right. Wax on, wax off. So, at any rate, got a question here. I didn't see it pop up. I have a patient with poor circulation in her legs, which causes her to have painful cramps and loss of feeling. When I wrap her legs, she feels no response. Do you recommend turning the machine intensity up or keep it low for longer? You want?
Okay, well, I mean, the answer to that is there's no right or wrong here. And what treatment works today, I would probably not do the same the next day if it were me. You have to always understand basic physiological fact that you want to avoid adaptation. So you want to change the treatment modality for a person who has microcirculation deficiencies. Either will work, but I wouldn't do the same all the time. That's my answer.
My question would be, Celia, is to what intensity are you using when you treat her legs with regard for the energy that you're putting in? Are you treating it, as you mentioned, are you treating it low at this point because you're afraid of discomfort? Or is your setting, can you count the clicks? Is it a click, 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 click? Or is it a click, 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 click? Or a click, click, click? Where are you on that scale? That would be my question to ask you to begin with, so I can have some basis for where you're going. But what you need to understand, well, hopefully you'll be able to get back to me with that type of situations. When she has circulation issues, it's much like neuropathy. How long has the indication been there? Is this something that we're trying to reverse in 1 or 2 treatments, or is this something that's been going on for years, and now we're going to try to approach? So when it's like atrophy and muscle atrophy, if the muscle is dead or necrosed to the point that section of the muscle is not alive, then you're not going to do anything with it. Can you nourish what's around it? Sure. Can you keep it from getting any worse? Sure. So if you're dealing with this person in their legs, it may take multiple treatments to get them to a point where the circulation begins to revive and be good in those areas to nourish those nerves back to where the function that they need to have, if they're still capable of having that. So there's several questions that need to be asked to really give you the answer. But what I would say, you have to be careful or be cognizant. I had a guy one time that had neuropathy in his feet. He couldn't hardly feel it. He had difficulty walking to a point. He couldn't feel anything. Didn't mean it wasn't working. Didn't mean we weren't treating him. It just meant that he just couldn't feel it. And because of the nerve deterioration that was there. So if that's the case, that's what you need to look at. But I would put it at a situation, if you put it on your foot, on your leg, and you can feel it, and you put it on her leg and she doesn't feel it, that's okay. Treat her. Move up and down the leg, as Doc pointed out, different directions, different intensities. Treat the low back. A lot of times when we treat carpal tunnel, we treat the wrist, the elbow, the shoulder, and the low back because the nerves go all the way around to the back. And so we want to get everything included, kind of like what you were talking about with the neurological type of issues, with the Lyme and those things, treat the whole area. So, Celia, I hope that answers a little bit of your question, but there are some other points that would need to be addressed. If you'd like to give me a shout, I'd be happy to discuss that with you as we go along. Good enough?
Good. Very good.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your questions. Celia, thank you so much for the great question and gave me an opportunity and Doc to explain it a bit further. So it's been great being with you this afternoon. Office hours on Tuesdays, 9 o'clock and 2 o'clock. I've very much enjoyed having Dr. Kressler here with us today as a medical advisor to Magna Wave and helping us better enrich the training and better enrich what we're doing for you, our customers, and people who are looking to be associated with Magna Wave today or in the future. So thanks for being with us, and we'll talk to you soon. Have a great day. Bye-bye.